Good evening to you all. It's Seb again, and yeah, we're back. We're back. It took a little bit of a break there, just a couple of days, and today we're going to continue with our practice. I did record a podcast episode the other day, but this mic screwed up a little bit during it. Not too sure why, and also I didn't feel right about the way I recorded it, so that's gonna be repeated at some point. But today we're gonna move on a little bit from the skeleton, which we will come back to, but we're gonna move away from it just a little bit so we can practice our line weight and just line in general, because that's another fundamental of drawing, which obviously will come with practice, but it's good to just have some things in your head now as you're starting out to make sure you keep them in mind when you're creating your line work, and to make sure you're following these sort of guides if it suits your style, obviously. But I'm just going to give you a couple tips on what I do with my line work and such. So yeah, that's what today's going to be about. And also, thank you so much. We've reached 200 subscribers recently, which was a good feeling, and I can see that you guys are enjoying this sort of series where you follow me on my journey to become a better artist, and you follow along with me, hopefully. I'd love to see some of your work. Not sure how we're gonna do that, but I'm sure one day we'll build some sort of a community where we can share all our work and how we're doing through all of this, maybe in the form of a Discord or something. But anyway, let's get into it. I'm not sure how long today's sort of practice will be, because it's not such a broad topic, but I just want to show you guys what I do and we'll go through it together. All right, you can see from our previous lesson we have a little bit of the skeleton popping through, and I've also prepared for today's lesson just a couple sketches which I'll go over in a second. These are very rough and I did use a reference for them. I know I keep talking about reference, but these are just here to show the line work, which we're going to talk about. But first, we'll start off with a little bit of practice and a little bit of kind of theory behind this, behind what I want to explain. So, first, also the thumb is still recovering, but it's pretty good. It's looking pretty good. I'm just keeping a plaster on it at the moment. And for today, we're using just a normal HB pencil. I do have a marker here in case I want to make anything a little bit more pronounced, but I want to talk to you about hand movement when you're drawing, which is a very important thing. A lot of the time when you watch artists, they will tell you not to do this when you're drawing something. In my opinion, if you can do this well, go for it, because it's what you're comfortable with. Like, you could, do that and draw what we just drew in a much better way whilst doing what is called the chicken scratches. So if that's what you like doing and you feel comfortable and you're happy with what you're producing, like this here, then go for it. I mean, it's what you want to do, but ultimately theory says when you're drawing lines like this, you should use your whole arm when you do it. So rather than my hand moving like this, it should be moving like this. So you should do a whole sweep. Even if it doesn't always come out perfect, it's what theory says you should do. For me, it's depending on the situation. Usually I do use this motion. It's definitely a lot easier when you're trying to make like a straight line. So if you use your whole arm, you can create a straight line. If you use your wrist, it's a lot harder. You start going curved, because naturally your wrist will do a curve. So just to sort of keep this in mind, I know a couple artists who do the chicken scratching stuff, especially when you're doing your rough work. There's nothing against you doing that. I say go for it. So yeah, what I was going to say is I've seen artists do this for their rough work, and then when they do their line work, they still do the chicken scratching, but they're just a lot more careful and it still looks nice. So you do that if this is what you like. Don't, just because theory says so, which usually it's obviously great to follow theory, and it will be a lot easier for you to do a straight line if you use your whole arm. You got to do what's good for you and what's comfortable for you. So, with that being said, for line quality, if we are doing straight lines, we can use the technique of using our whole arm. So this is just out here for you to know. Wrist for details, if you're going in and drawing different details and being a little bit more accurate, you can use your wrist and slow down. But if you're trying to do a nice straight flowing line, use your whole arm. It will make your lines look a lot smoother and generally a little bit more professional. But it also depends on how you've been practicing, right? Another thing that I want to cover today is the line weight. So there's a really great artist online called David Finch, and he shows a more comic book like technique of doing thicker lines, especially when you're using like a pen. With a pencil, I guess you can go from thin to thick, but it's not always great. And there is also theory behind using thicker lines on our artwork, which will be explained when we move over here. But in general, what you can do is you can start off with like a little circle and then go outwards. Little circle, out, little circle, out. And you get the look of a taper, which you would usually get with something like a fountain pen or anything. Yeah, I think fountain pens are the main ones. You can get fine liners. Eventually they will start doing something like this when you sort of work them in. But this is the sort of lines that we're going for. And we obviously use lines for line work, but lines can also be used for shadows, right? So you do cross hatching and you can layer lines on top of each other and all that, but that's not what this is going to be about. So today, I'm going to show you some quick practices that we can do. Hold on, let me see if I can move this up a little bit. So let's do some practices. Let us create 2 points like this, right? 2 points, and what we're going to do, we're going to use our whole wrist. It's not perfect here because I'm having to push through the camera here because I've got it set up. I probably should have done this in a different spot or move it up. All right. So we want to go from this point to this point, and we're going to use our whole arm. If we used our wrist, it's way less comfortable to do it. But practice going from one bit to the next, just doing a smooth action like this with your hand. Once you've done that, what we can do now is practice our circles. This is something I learned in, sixth form when I was doing product design. We can now go inside and practice drawing circles. So we will draw these circles inside. Now this is a great exercise to warm up before you do any drawings. So you can also warm up by, in general, practicing circles. Make a little boundary box for yourself and create a circle inside this boundary box and try to keep as close to it as possible. What you can see a lot of people do, for example, if you have like a box here that we set up for ourselves, before they do a circle in here, they'll do this. They'll be like, okay, practice, practice, practice. It's almost like you're practicing before you put the circle in. So you keep doing these circles and then you go bang and okay, yeah, not the perfect example, but you can do it inside as well. So see here, I'm using my wrist for this. But if I use my whole arm, I think the circle can come out a little bit, it depends, yeah. Well, this one's a little bit cleaner, right? It depends on the situation. I think a circle that's this small is perfectly fine to do with your wrist because you can do the same motion, but if it was like this big, you can't do that with your wrist. Anyway, this was a quick little thing that you can do for your warm-ups. And I very much recommend you get some rough sketching paper. I don't really know why I did this in my sketchbook. Bit of a waste, especially with the fact that I'm actually near the end of it. But you can do this to practice, and I recommend you do these lines throughout the whole page. You do different line lengths, so rather than setting like the whole page, do little ones like this. So just quick, and try and keep similar distance apart and all that, and then go inside and you do your circles. And this general exercise will help you with things like this, where you see the shoulder, and when you're drawing on this shoulder, rather than doing the chicken scratching and all that, if you want a smooth line that goes through it, you'll be able to learn how to do that action in like one whole sweep. That's really what this sort of exercise is for, and that's what the learning of this is for. But now, as I said, this might be a little bit of a shorter video, but what we're going to do now is we're going to talk about the line weight. So where should your lines be thicker? When I was learning product design, we did thicker lines anywhere where a line was, what was it? Where a line wouldn't meet, I think it was when the line would not meet anything behind it. So let's say you did I'm going to do a cube here so I'm not wasting my page. You did a cube, very rough cube. You wouldn't make this line thicker, but you'd make this line thicker because there's nothing behind it. There's a fall off. So these lines outside would be thick and these would be thin. This was I don't know if this is like a way of product designers looking at it when they do their sketches, but this is just one theory that I've done. The second theory is one I prefer, is wherever there's no light is where your line will be thicker, right? Because it makes sense. There's less information there, so therefore there's almost like a shadow being already created here. So therefore that line that's away from your light will be darker. So to illustrate a little bit more clearly, this here is the arm, and we're going to have a light source coming in from, let's say, here. This is where our light's coming in. So everything here will be light. This will be light. Now everything directly adjacent to this, I think that's the right word. So for example, anything that is this direction is a thicker line. So if I was to do it here, this line here, we will make thicker because there's a shadow being created. It's a direct opposite of where the light is. So thus we can make this line thicker. Now this one's starting to straighten out, so it's going to be a little bit thinner because it's not in direct opposition to the light. But again, here it's going to be thicker because this is directly opposite to our light source, as well as this line. And this is going to be fairly normal, and then we're going to get thick here again. So these lines should be the ones that are becoming thicker. Even lines like this we can start thickening up because there's something called ambient occlusion occurring in these things, which is just when two surfaces meet. Let's say like the crevice of our fingers here, there's naturally going to be a shadow created between them. So like in between here, there's naturally shadow being created because two surfaces are meeting, right? So this is what we're trying to recreate with the use of these thicker lines. And to be directly opposite here, these lines where the light hits are going to be much, much thinner. Whereas these lines here, which also are affected by light, but they're a lot less affected than lines of like this direction, they can also be slightly thicker, sorry. So these lines will be the thinnest, and these will start getting a little bit thicker. So I don't know if I can try and illustrate that even more here. And I do hope this is making sense. Actually, a little bit of a different video today. This is more instructive rather than me just practicing, but it's still good. Hopefully, I'm definitely pro doing videos like this as well. So in the next one, we'll go back to some more anatomy stuff. But yeah, so to make an understanding of this, this is our light source. This is our shadows being created because it's directly opposite to our light source. So if you imagine this as a 3D plane here, these are almost going around here. So these will be the lightest parts. This will be the darkest parts. So if we then do have like a shadow forming here, this will obviously be darker. This will be darker here. So naturally the lines behind the shadows, they will be dark. So that's just a little bit of the theory that I'm talking about. And also illustrate it here on this sphere, the circle at the moment. But if we again have our light source coming in here, this side of the sphere is going to be the darkest, and it's going to have the darkest, thickest line. There you go, we can see that we're doing the chicken scratching here, which is me just showing you that you can use this in your work because it does still look good. Just got to learn how to use it. So this bit of the sphere will be the thickest because it's going to be the darkest. This is where, like, the shadow, if you have your classical shading sphere, this is where the darkest shadow of the sphere will be. Right? Fill this in. And then this is, again, the lightest. So the line is thinnest and it is the lightest as it gets. And then there's a runoff to it. And obviously, if we were to draw in the shadow would be something like this. Like it will be behind the sphere building up here. So, hopefully you understand that. The line directly opposite to the light will be the darkest and thickest line. This is where you'll use the thickest line weight. This here, if I just move my camera a little bit so you guys can see it. This here is not the best example of a face I've ever drawn in my life, but we'll go with it for this. I think the eyebrow is a bit messed up. I might fix the eyebrow because it's embarrassing. Right, yeah, it looks a little bit better. Here, let's think. Where would be the nicest place to do the light? Let's do it directly coming in from here. So we will have the light coming in here. So therefore, these lines here, which are already a little bit too thick, will be the thinnest. So we'll make sure they look very thin and very delicate. Now, anything opposite to this, so for example here, this is where we'll start getting darker lines. Here on the outside of the ear is where we'll start getting darker lines because there's a shadow being created behind here. This here will also be a darker line. The lips, I guess a little bit here. Chin's getting a little bit darker. This also will become a slightly darker line because there's a shadow being created, and especially the lines behind here. So this will also become darker. And this is how we can use line weight to improve our line work and make it just look that tiny bit more professional. Like there's thought going into this. It's not just randomly darker lines somewhere, like compared to a different area. There's actually something behind it explaining the reason why this is happening. And obviously here, got some light running off now, so we're going a little bit thicker here on this side. And here, because there's no light here, there's a runoff again. I think I'm drawing it here, right here. But obviously, if we imagine this face to be 3D, this here is going to be slightly in shadow when we have the left side of the face covered in light. So I'm just going to fill this in so we know. But as you can see, lightest, so thinnest line here because the light's hitting it, thickest line here because there's no light. There's a lot less light present on this side here. So yeah, that about kind of wraps up the line thickness, I guess. So you guys can see that well. Yeah, I think that really does it. The line work is a lot about practice. So that's going to be the main important thing here. I hope that made at least a little bit of sense to you guys. Line work is a bit of a tricky one because line work comes naturally as you progress as an artist. It's something that will improve over time, and you will see it improve. I think it's one of the things I started spotting first with my artwork. Not to say that my line work's like great or anything. I think it's definitely getting better than it was. But line work also often comes with style and how you draw your things. So this will all develop, but things like this theory of where to put thicker lines really helps you explore style, because this is often used in something like a comic book style or usually, well, yeah, it's mainly used in like comic books. So if you like that style, that's what you can go for, right? So I hope this was useful to you. Do these exercises I showed you at the beginning with the lines. I know it looks like a bunch of scribbles here, but there is really meaning to it. Doing things like this will help your hand get in the flow more. It will help you understand movement of your arm and hand when you're drawing. And it is a very important step. That's why I'm doing it in the fundamentals, because it is a fundamental. Building this movement of your hand will help everything else progress faster. So go out there, do some practice, and do some of these exercises. Just grab random objects that you might find. Even something as simple as this. This is just a massive a rectangle, or was a cuboid, because it's not a cube, it's a rectangle, so it's a cuboid. I hope I remember my maths right. Get something as simple as this and learn that there's light coming from a certain area. So if the light's coming from the top, I must make the bottom lines thicker, because that's where the shadow will be. So remember, shadow, thicker lines, light, thinner lines. It's very simple, but as soon as you have it in your mind and as soon as you practice it more, it will come way more natural, and there's actually going to be theory / thought behind your lines, and not just randomly, oh, I made this line thicker because I felt like it. We have reason for it. So that being said, I'll see you in the next one. I know this one was a little bit different than the previous episodes, but we'll get right back to all the anatomy stuff and everything. So I hope this was useful to you, and yeah, go out there, do more drawing, and take your time, but practice.